hallo aan alle Nederlandse luisteraars. Op dit moment bent u aan het luisteren naar de Skeptic Zone, voor wetenschap en kritisch nadenken. Voor meer informatie ga naar www.skepticzone.tv.
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
It's nice to be with you again. Richard Saunders here from Sydney, Australia. It's Skeptic Zone, episode number 122 for the 18th of February, 2011. On today's show, we have Maynard. Spooky action. Very spooky this week. He talks to this really strange guy he's discovered. Well, it's Brian Dunning. I'll level with you. It's Brian Dunning. Maynard speaks to Brian Dunning. Now, this interview was actually recorded last year, and it was this interview that brought our attention to Maynard. And then Dr. Rachael interviewed Maynard, and the rest is history, because Maynard is now a valuable member of the Skeptic Zone team. But this is a really good interview with Brian Dunning. Very interesting. What makes Brian Dunning tick? What makes Brian Dunning tick? Why does he do Skeptoid week after week? What is his motivation? Well, Maynard asks all the hard questions, and that interview's coming up very soon. And thank you, Maynard. Thank you, Maynard, for this interview. If you want to find out a little bit more about Maynard, visit maynard.com.au. Also on today's show, we check out a new Drinking Skeptically here in Sydney, a new sort of skeptics in the pub in the inner west suburb of Newtown. Jason Brown, otherwise known as Drunken Madman, has thrown together a new meeting, a new social meeting, and we go along for a drink or two. And to wrap up the show, we have the Think Tank, with our good friends Dianne, Joanne Benhamu, Eran Segev, Dr. Rachael, and Jason Brown, myself, all run down to the club down the end of the street, have a nice Chinese dinner, and discuss interesting issues. Now, I really have to thank listener Erich Metleg from Japan, or he's living in Japan at the moment, who sent me some power balance bracelets in the post from a vending machine. For the princely sum of about $4 each in Japan, you can buy your own power balance wristband, which is identical to the real thing. The real thing. Yeah, well, they're identical to what they sell as the real thing, if you know what I mean. And he also sent me some other wristbands that don't even bother with the hologram. They're just simply silicon bands with claims about strength and flexibility and health and all this sort of stuff. Amazing. Now, I've put a link to Eric's music, interesting music he's got on iTunes, on the newsletter this week. But now it's time for some nice Earl Grey tea, hot, while we enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of people out there doing some woo. There's a lot of people out there on the side of science, but in that science field, we have a man who is, at this very moment, sky-clad in his hot tub somewhere in Orange County in the US. It's Brian Dunning from Skeptoid. Hi, Brian. How are you?
And not only just at this very moment, at virtually all moments.
You mention your hot tub a lot. You're the only skeptic I know who has a 24-hour hot tub going there.
I don't mention it a lot. I mentioned it like once, and somehow it's become my trademark. I'm all in favor of hanging out with great people with neat philosophy, even running around naked in the forest with them, especially if their chicks are hot.
It has become your trademark. And look, you did put out the call to any pagan girls that they're welcome to join you in the hot tub Skyclad. Would you like to explain what Skyclad is for our non-pagan friends?
Well, I certainly wouldn't say no to that. Yes, Skyclad is a pagan term for basically naked.
every week you do a little podcast about, well, how would you describe it?
I'm trying to find things that people generally believe that aren't true. That's my ideal show subject. And I try to always find some perspective that most people have not heard. No matter if they're an experienced skeptic or someone who's brand new to this, I try to find something that makes it interesting for everyone.
How did you get involved in skeptical thinking?
Actually, by listening to podcasts. I had been someone who, like many people, first was introduced to the idea when I was younger, watching James Randi on the Johnny Carson show here in the United States. It wasn't until much later, really only about 5 years ago, that I discovered there was such a thing as podcasts, that I learned that there was actually an organized, groups of skeptics, per se.
One question I find interesting about the skeptics group is that how do you go when you have people's belief in faith? Like, a lot of skeptics can be atheists, but a lot of them have religious beliefs as well. How do you draw that line between demanding scientific proof and not insulting someone?
You ask a lot of questions there. There is no such thing as the person who is completely skeptical about everyone. I don't think that you should demand that everyone be completely perfectly skeptical or completely perfectly right or grounded in rationality, however you want to describe it, because nobody is. What's important is that people recognize what's the right direction to go. They recognize what's real, what the benefits are of understanding what's real. And that's what's truly important, getting started on the right path.
Where does reasonable wandering and perception stop and sort of crackpot theory start?
That's a great question. And that's a conversation that I try to have whenever I meet a psychologist. Is there any way that you can define when someone has normal, healthy delusions like you and I and everyone else has, and when they are actually diagnosably crazy? What's the dividing line? For example, you and I can walk into a room, and if we have a pimple on the middle of the nose, we're certain that everyone in the room is looking at that pimple. That's a delusion. That's not true. Nobody cares about the pimple on our nose, but we think everyone's looking at it. We're a little bit deluded. That's not unhealthy. That's not a problem. But for some people, their delusion governs every minute of every day. They become a danger to themselves and to other people. They lose their jobs. They lose their interpersonal relationships. Somewhere, everyone's on that spectrum. Somewhere, there's a dividing line.
What was the dividing line that turned you into someone who wanted to earn a living as a skeptic or try to take down that path? What motivates you to go out there and basically, mess up people's Lego blocks when they're really happy with their delusion they've built?
Yeah, I mean, when I got started, that was pretty much what I was doing. I was debunking. I kind of quickly learned that that's not healthy. That doesn't do anyone any good. Their beliefs are cherished beliefs usually, whether it's a belief in some sort of energy healing or whether it's a belief in ghosts. People tend to take those beliefs pretty seriously and they treasure them. If you're just taking their ghost away, you're not doing them any favor. What's important is to give them something better, something that they can take and use in their daily life and be happier and be a better person for it.
A lot of people also believe that there's strong conspiracies of larger groups. Like, people think that there's big pharma, big pharmaceutical companies that are keeping us ill because that is how they make their money, by selling medicine. Where people like yourself and other podcasts like the Science-Based Medicine podcast believe that there's big placebo, where there's an industry based around selling something that really doesn't work.
Yeah, you can certainly call it that. Yeah, big pharma, big oil, big food, big toxins. There's a conspiracy theory for just about everyone. If you promote the scientific perspective, you're pretty much one of the bad guys.
One of the points you go on about is if you are trying to present a program that is factually based, the fact that it's factually based doesn't make it interesting. You've actually still got to make it a good show. Do you think some people fail because, the X-Files was a great show because, the stories and the dynamic of the characters, and they had really interesting, wacky plots, and could you have done that interesting a show with using facts?
Yes, you could have. The X-Files could have been completely fact-based. It would have been much, much harder for the writers to come up with. You see, that's why shows like, I don't know what you have in Australia, but we've got Oprah Winfrey here.
Oprah is omnipresent, very much like, a supernatural being herself.
Okay, she promotes anything that's sensational. That's pretty easy to do because you can pick up any book, magazine, and find something sensational. What I would have to do is we have to put the sensation through the reality filter. We have to filter out 99% of it that's not true. But if you work hard enough, you can find what's sensational and what's true. And then you have something that's as interesting and fun as the X-Files, but it's actually based on good information and doesn't teach people to think badly about the way the universe works.
Brian Dunning, as a broadcaster, is there one pseudoscience that really pushes your button? Is there one that really tends to annoy you and you have trouble holding back whenever you encounter it?
Go back to Skeptoid episode 001, and that's exactly what motivated that one. And that was on New Age energy. The way the word energy is used in pop culture really rubs me the wrong way because it's used in a completely meaningless way 99% of the time.
Is it possible that quantum theory could open the door to some unexplained phenomenon that we don't know about yet that could explain those energies?
Well, certainly, but what you're talking about is something that's not known yet, and that's part of what's so frustrating is people like Deepak Chopra and so forth who are always trying to promote is it supernatural and paranormal. They often use quantum theory supports this as an excuse because they don't know what the heck they're talking about. You and I don't know what the heck they're talking about. And so they just try to use quantum theory, quote unquote, as an excuse to explain any claim they want to make.
Is it possible that sometimes being too rational could maybe close your mind to serendipitous discoveries?
Well, I think the more rational you are, the more open your mind is. An open mind is someone who is open to having their mind changed. And if you're rational, good information will change your mind. If you're irrational, you're going to cling to whatever you want to cling to, and good information will not change your mind.
Brian, is there just a touch of irrationality in your life? I know you've said on the air that, whenever you think you're getting a cold, you might take some extra vitamin C, even though the evidence doesn't really support that. Well, what's your personal woo?
Oh, gosh, you put me on the spot. That's happened to me in a lot of Skeptoid episodes that I've done. I've got a bum knee, for example. And I always thought, my knee will start hurting when the weather's going to change. I learned that that's not true. And once you understand what's happening there, suddenly the effect disappears and you don't notice that anymore. Vitamin C was another one. I grew up my entire life believing that if taking vitamin C will reduce the severity of a cold or prevent it from happening. And that's not true either. It happens all the time that I learn the facts.
Some of the topics you've looked at that I've found very personally interesting are rods. Now, rods are supposed to be creatures that live in the sky that we can't normally see, but some single couple charge device cameras can capture them. Do you think there's any evidence whatsoever that these creatures exist?
Sure, those photographs, and it's pretty poor quality evidence. This is one of those stories that the explanation is really interesting. A lot of your listeners probably know this already, but if you picture an insect flying, he's moving through the air and he's beating his wings. And if you imagine the path traced by the edge of each wing, it's going to be a wavy line, like a sine wave. Now, if the frame of film lasts for, say, 1/10 of a second, and the insect moves a certain distance and beats his wings a certain number of times, you're going to see in that film a solid wavy line, and it's going to look like a big long worm with a big undulating wing. And that's exactly what these rods are. It's basically just insects. And with the lighting conditions and the camera settings are just right, it's going to look like what people call a rod. If you didn't know any better, you might think, wow, that picture's pretty compelling. But once you understand what's happening, it's one of those cases where, gee, that's really cool. The science is more interesting than the fantasy.
And you don't always deal with the supernatural, Brian. One of your interesting episodes I enjoyed was you covered spy radio stations. These are these stations around the world that are just saying weird numbers, often in old Eastern Bloc countries or Russia. And you discovered that, well, some of them might be spy stations, but there's many reasons for those weird shortwave broadcasts.
Someone suggested it to me, and it sounded really interesting. And I started asking people about these, and people were saying, oh, yeah, I've heard of those. Some people were suggesting things like, oh, they're ocean buoys that periodically transmit their data, or they're, some sort of a seismic meter on some mountainside somewhere. There's all kinds of possible explanations. But it turns out that in the case of many of these numbers stations, as they're called, they actually are being used by nations, and not just Eastern Bloc nations, by the United States, by Great Britain, for transmitting instructions to spies overseas.
It's hard to tell what percentage of that is the spies and which percentage is just keeping the frequency open, because we don't know that, do we?
Yeah, no, we don't. But for example, there's one out of Russia called the Buzzer that's been just transmitting a buzzing tone for something like 40 years now. I think only once or twice have they ever broadcast any data on it. So, yeah, you're exactly right. They're just keeping that station open in case they need it.
Listener feedback must be fairly interesting because you've got active forums on your site. You get some pretty hot-button topics, and you do touch politics. You've spoken about Tibet and things like that, Sarah Palin. What has really had the poo being flung at you, Brian?
Anytime you attack something that people are making money at, and that's multi-level marketing, network marketing plans, detoxification schemes, things like wheatgrass juice, any kind of alternative medicine that people are selling. Anytime people are selling something, that's when all the people who sell it, they come to my website and they post these horrible messages about how evil I am, and they post a lot of advertisements to their products, and the moderators on my site take the advertisements out, but we leave everything else in. So that's what it really gets under people's craw when you attack their income. I have no problem doing that, by the way. When someone is making money by ripping people off, by basically selling fraud, I have no problem calling them out on it.
Constantly, I'm talking to people who are seeing phenomenon and claim that they've seen phenomenon, and they get angry with skeptics because skeptics will not accept a large amount of eyewitness accounts of UFOs or of ghosts, and they will not accept a large body of eyewitness accounts. People are supposedly seeing something, Brian.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they are. I think skeptics are just as interested in those stories as we are in testable evidence. The problem is that a story that someone tells, someone saw something, whatever that is, all we have is just an anecdotal report from them. Unfortunately, we can't test that. We can't try to reproduce that. A statement, a personal story, is not testable evidence. And so as interesting as it might be, it just doesn't leave us anywhere to go. And so we can't use it. It's not a matter of not liking it or not wanting it to be true. It's just that it's useless as far as being testable scientific evidence goes.
Brian Dunning, you've been doing this for many years now. Do you think the world is getting more rational or we're getting more kooky?
Oh, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think I'm going to be in business a long, long time.
What's the best rational way to see your path through in this odd world we live in, Brian?
Be positive. Don't burn bridges. Don't get people mad at you. Don't annoy people. Don't go around being holier than thou and acting like you're the only one who's right and you're the only one who knows anything, because you're not.
Do you think Richard Dawkins suffers from that sometimes?
Well, he's in another boat. I mean, he's basically... I mean this respectfully, but he's basically a sideshow. He's an atheist activist. He's not out there trying to make friends or making any difference. His work is really controversial and it sells. Nobody changes their mind. Nobody changes their mind from listening to Richard Dawkins. But from my show, I think I do change minds because I don't go out there and attack people, and I don't try to present anything in a confrontational manner.
With your show or with anybody's show is to look it up for yourself. If you don't believe you're hearing something on the radio, look it up. Go online, check a couple of sources, go to a library.
No, you should only listen to some podcaster, and you should believe everything he tells you.
Oh, okay, I'll write that down. I'll tattoo that, Brian. Brian Dunning from Skeptoid, thank you for joining us today. And look, I'm sure you've got a long history ahead of you investigating woo.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Hi, this is Michael Cruz from the Committee for the Advancement of Scientific Skepticism at the Centre for Inquiry Canada. CAS is committed to critically examining scientific, technological, and medical claims in the public forum across Canada. Working with our expert advisors, local CFI branches, and other skeptical groups, CAS confronts the peddlers of pseudoscience with evidence-based scientific inquiry. 2010 has been a watershed year for the skeptical movement in Canada, and in 2011, CAS will continue fighting bad science in the media and the government. If you would like to become involved in the fight to promote critical thinking in Canada, or if you have a concern about the spread of pseudoscience in the Canadian media, please contact us at cas@cficanada.ca. You can also follow us on Twitter at CFICAS and on Facebook at CAS at Centre for Inquiry Canada. CAS, fighting pseudoscience without apology.
Skeptics in the Pub is a hit all around the world, with local skeptics finding like-minded people in a relaxing setting. I was delighted to find out that there is a new Skeptics in the Pub, a second Skeptics in the Pub, in Sydney, Australia, in the inner west suburb of Newtown.
I went along to find out more.
Oh, really?
You know him? You know him from the think tank? It's
Media Watch.
And from Media Watch, of course. Fame and fortune are yours. It's Drunken Madman. And you have a nice red.
I do. I have a lovely red. A cold weather red from New Zealand. It's very nice. Hang on.
Oh, yes?
Yeah, it's delicious.
Excellent. Now, you're the guy who's really responsible for this, I think.
Yeah, it's my fault.
Yes.
Yep. I figured Sydney had enough social skeptics to have a second drinking night in the pub with skeptics. So I started this up. And, we had, 6 the first time, and now we had a dozen last time around. We're, about 8, 9 now?
Yeah, and the evening's young.
So we're going all right, and the night is yet young, yeah.
Yeah.
We know there's a few up the road at Pub Quiz at the moment. They'll be rocking down later on.
Right.
So, yeah, it's quite nice.
And the pub we're in at the moment is, for our listeners,
the Town Hall Hotel in Newtown on King Street.
Which is just right across the street from the Newtown station?
It's right next to Newtown station, on the same side, right across the street from the Zanzibar, and just on the corner of Enmore Road and King Street.
And what is your plan? On what dates can our listeners look forward to coming here and enjoying a drink?
Currently, we're here on the 10th Tuesday of every month.
Hang on, the 10th Tuesday of every month.
So there's a Tuesday in the month that has a teen in the number.
Yeah, it's the first one.
Yes.
Right. Because there could be two teens.
It's the second.
Yeah. It's the
second Tuesday, usually. But sometimes it can be the third Tuesday. I wanted it to kind of be unusually spaced.
It is unusually
so I put
spaced.
it on the 10th Tuesday.
Now, people can't possibly remember that, and I'm sure they can. Where can they run to with their web browser to find out more?
They can go to the Sydney Social Skeptics meetup group. That'll get them there. There is a Drinking Skeptically in Sydney Facebook group. That's not all that easy to find at the moment. I'll make it better. Or they can contact me on Twitter at Drunken Madman.
At Drunken Madman, of course. I'm quite delighted on how popular these social skeptical drinking sessions are becoming all around the world, I think.
Everywhere, yeah. All over Britain, all over the States, all over Australia. It's bloody great. I like it.
So the message for our listeners, if they're considering starting up something similar where they live, is by all means go for it.
Yeah, just get on with it. Put a little note up on meetup.com or Facebook or wherever. People will figure it out. Broadcast it around Twitter. Go to the #skeptic hashtag, and word will get around, and you'll find people to drink with. It's great.
You will, and let us know here at the Skeptic Zone, and we'll give you a shout out too. So enjoy the rest of your red.
Thank you very much, Richard.
And I'm here at this great new Skeptics in the pub in Newtown, with Jane. Hi, Jane.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, as you almost tried to drink your beer there. What brings you to the...
I'm trying to drink, but people keep speaking to me.
Oh, that's terrible. What brings you to this Newtown new Skeptics in the pub?
I just wanted to meet some people that didn't ask me to watch videos called Loose Change. That was really the thing that broke me.
So people have been asking you to watch Loose Change?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
I did watch it.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
Well, that's one up on me. I must admit I've never watched it.
It's really not that hard to pull apart, but obviously you go through and look at it afterwards and do some fact-checking. It gets even sillier.
So that's you're looking for an escape?
That was the straw that just broke me.
Yeah.
I don't want to be rude to people, so
this is interesting.
Therapy.
This is therapy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this is interesting because we've got the Skeptics in the pub downtown, which has been going for 6 or 7 years, and it's really, it just fills me with such hope that just people have decided, let's have another one. It's so much fun. Let's have another one. We'll put it in a different location here in Newtown, which is out from the centre of the city. And already there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people here. And I've already had a nice plate of nachos with Dr. Rachael. So I think this has got a really positive future.
It's a very relaxed feeling.
It is.
And everyone's chatting about, mostly nerdy stuff, let's be honest, but it's a pretty big range.
Now, you joined us down the Opera House last weekend for the overdose.
I did, and I was at the Crown. My first Skeptics meeting was at the Crown Hotel. It's one of those things I've been meaning to do for a long time and never really got around to. So.
And how did you find out about the skeptical movement generally?
Online, mostly. Things like Reddit, those kind of sites maybe first, and then Facebook meetup, those kind of the TAM meetings with
yes,
all those kind of things. Just
and
hanging around the fringes.
Hanging around the fringes, and now you're diving into the deep end.
Yes. It's really good. I think I was a little concerned because there's everyone I speak to is atheism or skepticism. They say, where are all the female atheists? Where are all the female skeptics? And
you're here.
Well, exactly. I'm right. I'm right here, and you go to Skeptics in the Cub in the Crown Hotel, and there's no noticeable male dominance in the room at all.
There's a big mixture of people.
There's a big mix of people.
Ages
you can't
and sexes.
tell. I was talking to another girl at the Overdose, just saying you can't tell where these people come from, what they do for work. It's such a big range. So,
well, I'm delighted that you're here, and I think this second satellite sort of variation of Skeptics in the Pub, I think it's got a great future, because this is a really nice pub. This is really cozy up here. It's fantastic.
It's good because a lot of skeptics are non-religious as well, so you don't get the Sunday social aspect.
Yeah.
So. You can redo it at the pub.
Enjoy your beer. I'll let you get back to your beer.
Thank you very much.
Now, of course, the conversation at Skeptics in the Pub is wide-ranging. Ash, you were just telling us about a psychic experience you had.
Yes, I've got a simple rule of thumb being a motorcyclist. Whenever there is the point that your brain brings up the word wanker, you get out of the way. I was sitting on my bike on the road waiting for the Middle Harbour Bridge to open, backed up in traffic, near the crest of the hill, in front of behind a Hyundai, and I just thought to myself, wow, wouldn't it be terrible if some wanker came over the top of the hill? That word wanker came into my mind, so I moved out of the way, and just after I did, about 45 seconds later, a Kingswood came flying over the hill, smashed into the back of the Hyundai, and pushed it into 4 other cars, making a 5-car pile-up. So I was very happy that my psychic abilities had saved me from that perilous accident.
Let him go. Say goodbye.
Just get out of the way.
Just get good advice.
Jane also mentioned that Ash must be a Sagittarius because they're very intuitive.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Who's a Virgo?
And she was convincing me earlier that she was a skeptic. Well, your cover has been blown, girl. That's it. Now, of course, Dr. Rachael, it's good to see you here at the new Skeptics in the Pub. It's going quite well.
It is going well, Richard. This is not my first time here, I have to say. I have been here before once.
Yeah. It's a different feeling to the one we have downtown. It's a different pub. It's there's no formality, is there?
No, there's no speaker here. There's funky music in the background, which you might be able to hear. Jump around. No, but it's a nice bar. It's relaxed and lots of friendly people and good food. So yeah,
good food.
Yeah, very good.
I enjoyed my nachos before.
I had a salad and it was very yummy.
Yeah. So I think the message we keep telling our listeners, no matter where you are in the world, if you want to start a Skeptics in the Pub, well, what's stopping you?
Yeah, well, this one was just started by a drunken madman just a few months ago, and there's probably 10 or 12 people here now, which is pretty good, and it's only going to get better, I think.
I think so. And if you do start a new Skeptics in the Pub anywhere in the world, why not invite Dr. Rachael and myself to come along and speak to your group?
Particularly if it's at a restaurant that sells crab legs. We're very interested.
Thank you, Dr. Rachael.
Hi, this is Brian Dunning from Skeptoid.com. The best way to share the benefits of critical thinking and science with someone who doesn't listen to podcasts is to give them a book. I invite you to check out my newest book based on selected episodes of the Skeptoid podcast, Skeptoid 3, Pirates, Pyramids, and Papyrus. 50 chapters contain something for everyone, questions you've always wondered about, and subjects to intrigue and challenge your friends. Pirates, Pyramids, and Papyrus by Brian Dunning, with a foreword by Richard Saunders of the Australian Skeptics. It's available now from major online booksellers as a paperback and as an e-book. Or get a personalized copy from Skeptoid.com. I'm Brian Dunning from Skeptoid.com.
If you would like to bid on a copy of Brian Dunning's latest book, signed by the author and also Richard Saunders, click the link at SkepticZone.tv on show number 122.
Join us now for Drinking Skeptically in the Think Tank.
Are you gazing at Jason?
Yes.
He's just across the table from you. Welcome to the Think Tank, Dianne.
Thank you, Richard.
And welcome, Eran Segev.
Thank you, Richard.
And welcome, Joanne Benhamu. Oh, I'm still nomming your noms, I see.
No, I'm done now. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Joe.
Swallow.
Welcome, Jason.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Is that the homeless Jason?
It's not the homeless Jason. I have a home.
He has and of course, welcome Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
Hi, Richard.
What an interesting time it's been lately, and it's really great to see everybody back here at our favourite club down the end of the street for the Think Tank. Let's kick off straight away by some news with our anti-vaxxer friends. They've been lampooned, lambasted, and what was it? Lamb chopped?
Lamb chops.
And wherever else.
Lamington.
Nice. Now, I'll just play a clip that was on a television show here called the 7pm Project just the other night.
But some still argue that vaccination is not the only answer to serious infections. And for parents who want an alternative, there are doctors willing to support their choice.
I will never advise against vaccination. However, under particular circumstances, I will support that. That would mean breastfeeding for the first 12 months of life. It will mean not being in a long daycare centre for more than 20 hours a week. An excellent diet. The parents have to be very proactive if they're going to choose not to vaccinate.
I'm a bit worried about what that woman said, that doctor said. You have a choice and you can be proactive. If you don't leave your child in childcare for 20 hours a week, that doesn't sound right. If you live for 18, they're
when our kid, on his first day, he got a cold.
Let me be frank, I don't agree with that. I think immunisation, the whole point of immunisation and wiping out diseases like whooping cough and not having these small children, the 1 in 200 dying from this, is about all of us actually taking some responsibility, getting that herd immunity, because if we all don't jump on board, whooping cough will just stick around. We got rid of smallpox. There's nothing to say we can't get rid of this.
If we had a program mass immunisation, you reckon we could do smallpox?
We could get to that point. Okay. Theoretically, we could. To find out more about whooping cough and its immunisation, just head to 7pmproject.com.au.
So there you go. Great advice, Dr. Rachael.
Yeah, look, this comes on the back, Richard, of the tragic death, in fact, only today, of another baby in Australia from whooping cough. This time it was a newborn, 2 weeks old, a boy in Victoria. It's just, I mean, the epidemic that we have in this country is incredibly serious now. As our listeners might be aware, Meryl Dorey, who has strangely fallen off the face of the earth when it comes to the media.
She's a bit off the radar right now, isn't she?
Isn't that interesting? I wonder if it's got anything to do with the work that we've been doing behind the scenes to convince the media that she's probably not a very good resource or source for information.
No, she's preparing her defence.
She's preparing her defence.
She's doing.
Yeah, but we just after this segment aired that you refer to, we did find out that we've lost another baby. Now, she keeps on carrying on about 95%. Everyone, there's 95% coverage of whooping cough vaccination in this country. That is only for a very small segment of people, and I think it's from kids between 12 to 15 months have a 95% coverage. It was revealed in the segment last night, and I haven't checked these stats, but it seems like it's in the ballpark. There's something like 20% of adults are covered, currently vaccinated for whooping cough.
Yeah.
And that's because we got it years ago, but our immunity is worn off in the meantime.
Well, yeah, the pertussis immunity drops, if I remember right, it's about 5% a year. You get nearly 100% coverage in your first year, but by the end of 10 years, you're down to about 50% So,
a general comment from a lot of people is they don't know this. I mean, I didn't even know this.
No one has a clue.
No, I mean, this is we could say so much about this, but the point that you raised that we should stick to is that they copped it again. Now, the woman that you heard in that segment, Dr. Robin Cosford, she came across as this airy-fairy unicorn farts, rainbows and happy days, saying that just have a good diet and don't stay in childcare for more than 20 hours because, as people pointed out here earlier, bacteria and viruses wait till 20 hours before they jump on your kids, right? It's okay.
They've got tiny stopwatches.
Yes, they have. and her mentioning good diet, well, I think Eran commented that, if you put a Brussels sprout in front of a virus or bacteria, it says, oh, no, and it won't go near you.
Unlike me.
Until they grow up and they realise that it's healthy.
Yeah, that's right, until they grow up. And then, like some people at this table, they like...
Yeah, that's an adult virus.
Yeah, that's right.
And it won't infect the child.
That's right. So... she said some stuff that was completely preposterous. I was most impressed. I was disappointed that she was part of this report, but I was most impressed that it wasn't Meryl Dorey.
Yes.
But we did some research today, and because you said to me, and Peter Ratbag Bowditch also thought that he'd heard of her before. Now, it turns out that she was in a 2002 conference, which was run by the AVN.
Absolutely.
Where she sat alongside Meryl Dorey on a panel and took questions after her seminar.
Yep.
Most of her talk was about vaccines causing autism. Now
she strongly alluded to it in her talk in 2002, and she kept harping on about leaky gut.
Yeah, well, she was following the line of Wakefield, which was that leaky gut leads to autism, and that mercury is in vaccines, and it's...
That's right, she's mentioned
and it's a neurotoxin and bloody.
Basically, she's one of the brigade. She's one of the...
She is, she is. Yeah. But as you heard in that clip, as soon as they switched back to the panel after she spouted her unicorns and rainbow farts or whatever, they just took her to pieces.
Yeah,
I was very impressed by that, actually. That when the segment ended, and I was really pleased with how it had gone, and then when it ended with her participation, I was really disappointed. And then when they cut back to the panel, and Dr. Andrew Rochford and Andrew Bolt unexpectedly came out and really just hauled her over the coals for what she said and questioned her. It was just such a different
Actually, they
tone
mocked her, which is better.
Yeah, they did mock her.
Well, it was so easy to do. I mean, this ridiculous advice about 20 hours.
Yeah.
It was just laughable.
That was just incredible.
I mean, she is as it turns out, we don't know if she's still an AVN sympathiser, but she has in the past been an AVN sympathiser.
It wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me either.
She kept... just to interrupt you, she mentioned then, and in research I did today, then being 2002, something called this immunity shift from the World Health Organization. Vaccines cause an immunity shift.
Okay, they cause the immunity shift into the person.
So we're going to look. We'll research this more.
This is one of these things that you hear rolled out from all the anti-vaxxers. I heard exactly the same thing from Nimrod Weiner. Every time I say his name,
and
people laugh.
The thing is, when you mention his name, you have to, put a little asterisk and say that's really his name.
It's one of these anti-vaxxer rhetoric, know, and actually... Tom Sidwell, who's a member of SAVN, did a nice little example of where they get their references from the other day, where he did 5 steps to finding references for the anti-vaxxers on SAVN, where he said, type this into Google, you'll end up at Whale 2, which is a conspiracy anti-vax, crazy website.
It's whale.to, isn't it, I think?
Whale.to, yeah. Click on the vaccination tab, then click on the immunology tab or something, and then you'll find these 5 references that Meryl copy-pasted into her HCCC response. And it's like, this is how these memes of, the immune system shift gets passed around by these numpties, because they hear it and they parrot it from somebody else. That's my opinion. I haven't determined that, but
the problem is there's a lot of people who are not dogmatic. They really are worried, they're just ignorant, basically. I'm not saying ignorant in a bad way. They're just, new parents, and they look for information and they find these things. Because they perpetuate the same myths over and over again, it's very easy to find those things. You look for those things, you will find them more easily than you find the more complex truths that science offers.
There are people like Meryl Dorey.
Yeah.
That's why their parents go there then, because they find that information. So I think that's what I think the Stop AVN does fantastic work, because they try to cut that information down from those streams, really.
And it's always this false balance, isn't it, Dr. Rachael, that still goes on?
Yeah, well, this is, I mean, I look at it now as if 99.99% of the science supports vaccination as a tool to prevent communicable disease and suffering and morbidity and mortality, if the 0.01% are the crazy nut jobs, how does it make sense to do a story on vaccination and give one group half the story and the other group half the story?
Because that's the way journalists think.
Yeah, but when you think about that, there's 90%, 99.99% and 0.01%. You wouldn't give them 50% of the story.
You and me know, but the journalists, remember, in the back of their mind, or especially in the executive producer, is this show has to rate. We need a conflict. We need... And they're not trained to know that these people are complete cranks. Or if they are, they don't care. They don't care.
They know that it's 50% or that it's, 0.01%. They just think, oh yeah, I got that information, and that's it.
And don't forget that our side are often painted by these people as being cranks too.
I do take issue with the fact that they're not trained to know that this one's a crank and this one isn't.
All right.
I mean, and the reason I say that is because the fact is the vast majority of people out there actually do have a pretty good amount of trust in doctors and in healthcare and so on. And the vast majority of people out there are vaccinated, and the vast majority of people are able to actually, at some level, discriminate between things. Now, I know that a lot of times we sort of, not everyone may be as educated as other people about some scientific issues, but I do think that most people can actually be discriminating, not in every area. I think there are some areas where even the most, die-hard, skeptic who prides themselves on being discriminating, we all can fall down when it comes to certain things. And I think that it's not just that the journalists aren't able to discriminate between who should be asked for information. I think that it's more to do with the philosophy or the way journalism, the world of journalism actually works, in terms of having to provide a balance regardless of whether it's a reliable piece of information. I don't think it's that they're necessarily unable to discriminate between what's good and what's bad information.
I think they just don't care. I think really they want to put out a good story. I think most journalists, and I stand behind that statement, most journalists really care about the story. There's very few journalists getting the story out there. I think there's very few journalists who would let the truth stand in the way of a good story.
We should ask a lecturer at university and see how do they present it when they teach journalists. Yeah, I'm curious to see what they would do.
But I had exactly this discussion at Nexus in 2009, and I was told by
that's right.
I can't remember his surname now, Howard Schneider, I think it is, and he's a highly decorated journo and a lecturer in the States, and we got into a huge argument about false balance, and it continued into the green room afterwards for 45 minutes, because he was saying, no, that's the way we're trained, that's the way we'll do it, piss off.
Well, you have to think, how interesting is a headline that says, shock, vaccines still work?
But the thing is, you know what? There are no stories in the press about the Earth still rotating about its axis. Perhaps the best thing to do is simply not tell stories about things that we know the facts. It's not interesting. Don't talk about it. The fact that they feel a need to even talk about it suggests that they are looking for a story there. I mean, really, it's just the science is settled. Why is it a story? It shouldn't be. What should be a story is a child in Victoria who died because there are people who perpetuate these myths and these lies.
But as we heard last week on the Skeptic Zone, Tracy Spicer brought up an interesting point. She's slapping down Meryl Dorey. And she said something on radio which a lot of people maybe don't know, and I use the word maybe, is that these people, Meryl Dorey included, consider the horrible occurrence of shaken baby syndrome, is where a baby is shaken. Sorry, I'm getting emotional about this. Shaken so hard that it actually causes damage to the baby. They call this shaken maybe syndrome because, in their opinion, it's actually vaccines that do the damage to the baby.
I have to wonder how exactly a vaccine is meant to break a baby's ribs.
Erwin explained it, Jason.
Did he?
Yes, he did.
But that's Erwin. I stopped listening to Erwin.
I know, but Erwin said that when the baby is forced through the birth canal, it fractures the ribs. How did you not know?
Is Erwin a chiropractor?
No, Erwin's an anti-vax nut job who's Jason's going to talk about in a minute. He runs Vine.
Right, of course, yes.
What is it,
Vaccine Information Network, Vine, V-I-N-E.
Now, yes, this is...
I should point out, they don't know where the E comes from. This is anti-vax logic.
Erwin with an I. Now I know exactly who you're talking about.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, Jason, and especially about the fake reports?
Why don't I? Well, a little while ago, we do keep an eye on the Vine Facebook page, and a little while ago a graph popped up, which was kind of interesting. It's difficult on a podcast to describe it, but it was basically a graph of the decline in deaths per 100,000 head of population since the Haemophilus Hib vaccine was introduced. This is a graph that you can probably find around the internet here and there, but this one, interestingly, had a converse line on it that suggested that total meningitis reporting went up after the introduction of the vaccine, implying, of course, that the vaccine's been causing meningitis.
Yeah.
Interestingly, though, it's drawn on as if in crayon.
What?
And the key doesn't match the background. The key's from a non-existent source, and the copyright on the graph is from Fictus Corp. Now, fictus is a legal term that comes from the same root as fiction.
Right.
So this is an obviously invented graph. And, of course, Erwin of Vine accepted this as fact and trumpeted it all over his page in his kind of triumphant, pathetic way that he does. And so a few of us called it out and said, look, this is an obvious fake, and here's why. And he said, well, people have different takes on reality, and sometimes some of them approximate or even match reality. To me, the graph is real. To you, it's fake. To each his own. Apparently, the things going on inside Erwin's head are his special reality, and that applies to everyone else.
I just think of that Simpsons episode where you see inside Homer's brain, and there's a donkey with a fly buzzing around it.
I don't want to look inside Erwin's brain. I don't know what's in there. But the man's crazy. Yeah, this is the sort of thing. This happens quite a lot, but this is the most obvious fake of all.
Website again?
I've got it blogged on my blog, mycolleaguesareidiots.com.
Aren't we his colleagues at the moment?
Probably.
Okay, yeah.
Jason, you forgot to add the final sting in the tail of that story, which was the woman who made it up, who created it.
That's right, yes.
In Paint, I think it was.
She did it in Paint.
She did it in Paint. She went onto the website and she said, I made it up. I thought it would have been obvious. And she pointed out what you said, like the factors core thing. And she said, and I drew this on in McPaint. And Erwin, I don't know if he responded or not, but she said she made a full response about how she just made it up.
That was brilliant. It was quite superb. I should update my blog post with that, but you can find the whole story.
I left
there.
a comment.
Could I just point out, I mean, this I think is a good point to give some advice to anybody who wants to link to these things. Use nofollow.
In the code.
Yeah.
All right, now in a moment I want to talk about a very interesting judgment that was handed down, and we'll have a comment from Joe. But before we get to that, just a reminder, everybody, that you can subscribe for free to the Skeptic Zone newsletter. Just visit www.skepticzone.tv and subscribe.
I had to pay.
What?
If it's free, how come I had to pay?
You're a special case. And you'll find more about the show, some background information, links and extra reports there, and bits and pieces you might enjoy. Also available on the Skeptic Zone website, we have wallpaper for your iPhone or your iPod Touch, Skeptic Zone wallpaper, and Skeptic Zone ringtones. Yes, when your phone rings, you can hear Dr. Rachael reports. Indeed. Or the theme music.
Ding, 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 ding.
You're the
Is that it, is it?
frog.
It does sound like that, doesn't it?
That's the new Dr. Rachie theme. Yeah, so head to SkepticZone.tv and find out more. Now,
so do they get Stefan's version or Rachie's version from just now?
I think, you know what? I think we'll stick to the original, the good old Dr. Rachie Reports music, and you get the new theme and the old theme, the classic theme or the new theme. Actually, people posting Lindley been saying that they use the Skeptic Zone theme now on their phone, so when it rings, she thinks the podcast is starting. All right, on to more serious matters now. Joe, you've got the printout there from a lengthy PDF you should be telling us about.
Right, Richard. So I think a lot of listeners probably would have heard about this case, and I think we've talked about it before. In about 2000, when was it? I think it was the end of 2005. A woman by the name of Penelope Dingle, a lady who lived in Western Australia, died from metastatic rectal cancer. What brought the case to our interest was that when Penelope was diagnosed with her cancer, it was initially viewed by her doctors as a potentially curable cancer. Penelope had already fallen into the hands of, but by the time she was diagnosed, ended up well and truly in the hands of a homeopath by the name of Francine Scrayan. And for a period of about a year, she ultimately decided not to have what was recommended as her treatment, which would have been a course of chemotherapy and radiotherapy and then ultimately surgery. And Penelope decided to treat her cancer with homeopathy under the care, inverted commas, of this woman, Francine Scrayan. Now, you know, we've talked about this case quite a lot, and I have to say I've actually read the coroner's report in full. It's about a 40-page report, and the coroner makes some, I think, very, very important recommendations in the report. But in going through it, there were a number of things that struck me. And look, I say, you know, the report is available online, and I would encourage people to try and read it if they can. It's pretty harrowing and pretty distressing.
And in fact, I will link to that report in the newsletter if anybody's interested.
Sure. It makes for very distressing reading. Penelope Dingle suffered immensely at the hands of this woman, and I think it has some very, very interesting implications for how we view alternative health practitioners. This is a really extreme example, and I accept that not every homeopath out there is necessarily going to put every person that comes into their care in danger, but I think certainly the danger is there. And, we've talked so much about some of the things that can happen when you get involved in alternative medicine in this way, but I guess I'll just tell you about what the coroner has actually recommended. One of the things that came up as a result of this was that Penelope Dingle was married to a man by the name of Peter Dingle, Dr. Peter Dingle. Now, Peter Dingle is not a medical doctor. He is a doctor of, I think it was environmental toxicology. And he has a background of being very opposed to conventional medicine and very suspicious of conventional medicine, and has written a number of books himself recommending various diets and so on, and ways of avoiding toxins in the environment.
He's kind of like Australia's answer to Joseph McCullough, isn't he?
He is a little bit, but what I found interesting about the report was there was a lot in the report that was more telling about this particular group of people and how they got embroiled in this. One of the things that came out, which I thought was quite interesting, was that Peter Dingle's father apparently died of cancer, and he blamed the chemotherapy for his father's death. So there, in this instance, there are some experiences that these people had which have perhaps tainted their view of medicine, but that doesn't excuse what happened. It just, at some level, I guess, gives us a better understanding of how this all came about. Francine Scrayan, on the other hand, I think is just a woman with a callous disregard for science and really I don't think has the capacity for understanding what it was that she was dealing with.
So do you glean from the report that maybe she hasn't quite got her head in our world?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things
Richard,
that were...
She's a homeopath.
Well, no, but I mean, the thing is that, we come across, for example, doctors who endorse homeopathy and who practice homeopathy and actually have completed a medical training and should have an understanding of medicine. Yes,
Can I just mention something? Since July 2010, it's been legal for anyone to call himself doctor in Australia.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What? Absolutely.
I'm a doctor, did you know?
Sorry, can I get a clarification on this? What do you mean?
The Healthcare Practitioners Act of July 2010 removed protection for the term doctor.
Anyone can call themselves
I'm a doctor. You're a doctor.
But there has to be a qualifier there. So, for example, the reason that chiropractors can call themselves doctor, they can do it as long as they have at the end in brackets, Doctor of Chiropractic.
Hang on, so
That's the Chiropractic Act. That's the
But generally speaking...
But if I invent some new form of magical medicine, I can call myself Dr. Richard Saunders, XYZ.
Do you have to say what
I wasn't aware of that. I knew that even...
Going to Canterbury, Cairnsey, Quota Park and Ashbury. That's next Thursday, departing in approximately 5 minutes' time. Going to Canterbury, Cairnsey, Quota Park and Ashbury. Thank you.
I want to be the doctor of the courtesy bus.
Well, you can ask the mayor. Ask the mayor.
Oh, you're the mayor.
Yeah, I'm the mayor.
I'm sorry, Joe. We've completely thrown you off the track here, but I thought that was...
I was aware of the fact that in the chiropractor's code of conduct or whatever their document's called, that they have to put that qualifier at the end. But I know even with psychologists, they have to actually, a doctor has to
I'm a registered physiotherapist.
But I wasn't aware that they literally had...
You could be Dr. Dianne.
Yeah, but no, you can't call yourself a physiotherapist.
No, but you can call
According to the Wikipedia article, now I've read the Act as well, but Wikipedia summarises it quite well. With the introduction of the National Health Practitioner registration legislation on July 1st, 2010, the title Doctor is not restricted in any Australian state. Instead, they protected the title Medical Practitioner.
Let's go back. Going back to what I was saying. So you asked me about whether this woman was on the same planet as us. We're talking about a person who watched a woman in a state of unbelievable agony, wasting away. I mean, Penelope Dingle, by the time she finally accepted medical care, weighed about 35 kilos.
Wow.
She was in excruciating pain on a daily basis. Now, Francine Scrahan, according to the coroner's report, was embroiled in an incredibly unhealthy relationship with Penelope Dingle. She would be on the phone to her 12 times a day. She had her on this whole regime of homeopathic remedies. Penelope Dingle would call her in agony, asking what she could do about the pain, and Francine Scrahan would basically tell her that she just had to stick to the homeopathic regime.
This is in the report, huh?
Absolutely. It got to the point where when they finally admitted her to Fremantle Hospital with an acute bowel obstruction, in unbelievable pain, basically on the verge of if they hadn't have done something about it within 24 hours, she would have died. She finally accepted medical care, and they actually did operate on her, and she did actually end up going on to have radiotherapy, but it was palliative care. Francine Scrahan was in the background the entire time saying, no, don't have the surgery. You have to take the homeopathic remedies. If you have the surgery, I can't treat you anymore. If you listen to anyone tell you that you shouldn't be on this treatment, I can't treat you anymore. So Penelope Dingle was incredibly vulnerable and was really under the thumb of this woman, and Peter Dingle went along with it, in many ways endorsing what was going on. What was made even worse was the fact that when Penelope Dingle first went to see the surgeon who initially advised her, Professor Cameron Platel, who's a highly regarded surgeon, she was actually open to the idea of conventional medicine. She was not, she actually chose him as her surgeon based on his reputation. She was open to the idea of having her cancer treated, but she was already involved with this homeopath, and as time went on, her confidence in the medical profession and in having her cancer treated in that way was systematically eroded by this woman and by her husband.
Eroded, undermined.
Absolutely. She ended up consulting in two other doctors who, one of whom endorsed the homeopathy, the other who was prescribing vitamin C injections and some other weird treatments. Now, I think what's really important, though, is to actually have a look at what the coroner said. And what he commented on was, first of all, if I can just read this quickly, he talked about informed consent, and he said that this case has highlighted the importance of patients suffering from cancer making informed, sound decisions in relation to their treatment. In this case, the deceased paid a terrible price for poor decision-making. Unfortunately, the deceased was surrounded by misinformation and poor science. Although her treating surgeon and mainstream general practitioner provided clear and reliable information, she received mixed messages from a number of different sources, which caused her to initially delay necessary surgery and ultimately decide not to have surgery until it was too late. He then goes on to talk about alternative medical practitioners and he does it. A woman by the name of Sylvia Neubacher, I think it is, from the Australian Homeopathic Association, says that the association has attempted to provide accountable structures to ensure that homeopathic practitioners are qualified and have medical and professional standards, which would provide a safeguard to consumers.
You should see the faces around the room.
What he says is, I have serious reservations about any effort to register or otherwise legitimise homeopathy or other similar alternative forms of medicine. While I do not agree with the proposition that such alternative medical regimes should be outlawed, unless and until their supporters can provide appropriate and sufficient science base, any apparent legitimisation of these regimes could provide mixed messages for vulnerable and often desperate cancer sufferers. So his recommendation is that the Commonwealth and State Departments of Health review the legislative framework relating to complementary and alternative medicine practitioners and practices with a view to ensuring that there are no mixed messages provided to vulnerable patients and that science-based medicine and alternative medicine are treated differently.
Wow. That's very good.
But nothing's going to happen, is it?
Well, if only Commonwealth Government would take notice of that kind of thing. You know, we wouldn't have this nonsense legislation.
Well, why isn't this woman in jail? Why isn't she in jail? What was her punishment?
I don't know. I don't know yet how she's actually been.
Oh, well, a coroner is not. Coroner can't punish.
I know coroner can't, but if you're a medical doctor in this country and you do that, you get struck off.
There's nothing to strike her off.
This is the reason why the HCCC in New South Wales started the Alternative Practitioners Act in August 2008, so that these people could be prosecuted, because they currently fall through the cracks because there's nobody to.
But the homeopath, what did she do wrong as far as homeopathy is concerned? She did what every homeopath does: gives bad advice. I mean, so that's it.
Yeah, but
why would she?
Well. A person died as a result of what she said.
Yeah, but you shouldn't judge by the result. We accept homeopathy in general.
Even the homeopaths say that she didn't behave in accordance with homeopathic standards.
But the thing is, they only say it because a person died, not because she did anything different to what everybody else.
Yeah, and they're not going to change their practices.
No, of course not.
But Joe, there was one part of the transcript that I read where the judge said that basically he called Scrayan a liar.
He did.
He said he could not trust her as a witness or something.
Yeah, I have that here.
You've got that highlighted, Joe, amongst with all the other highlights.
How badly was her testimony deleted?
He says here...
Deleted.
Mrs. Scrayan claimed that she did not purport to treat the deceased cancer and said that she had no knowledge that the deceased had a belief that she was advising that homeopathy could provide a cure for cancer. I do not accept this claim by Mrs. Scrayan, whom I do not generally regard to be a witness of truth.
She's a liar.
Yeah.
Truth has been diluted.
That is, she's a liar.
So who brought this before the court of her husband? It was actually her family. And that was
it's
something.
It's a sister, but not her husband.
It was her sisters. It was her sisters, and that was actually something I found interesting because I know, Rachel, when we had talked about this case in the past, we'd been a bit critical of her family because we had initially thought that they really endorsed homeopathy. Now, I don't know whether they were just maybe casual users of it in the way that, some person goes... Yeah, some person who... Shut up. In the way that some person just goes up and buys a back flower remedy from the chemist thinking that they're just buying... You know what I mean? As opposed to someone who's a dedicated anti-medical person.
You got any of that remedy for me?
They actually were. Her family were completely unaware of her diagnosis. Peter Dingle and Penelope Dingle actually kept the diagnosis secret from the family until really late in her illness. They told the family that she had ulcerative colitis, and the family were horrified when they saw what was happening and tried to get her to have treatment, but she refused. So,
but Joe, it was only, and I recall this when I was reading the reports happening at the time, that it was only when she was told by doctors that she would be vomiting feces and die an incredibly painful death that she eventually succumbed to surgery.
That was on the day that she was admitted to Fremantle Hospital with the bowel obstruction, and it was the surgical registrar told her that, but she had been on the phone to Francine Scrahan at the same time and was actually tossing up between the advice of this, I'm sorry, absolute moron.
Don't be sorry.
And
don't be sorry.
Yeah.
I can't help thinking of the term whatstheharm.net right now.
I have this lateral problem-solving mind. Isn't assisted suicide still illegal in Western Australia?
I believe so.
Dr. Peter Dingle.
Interesting point.
Suicide.
Interesting point. What a sad state of affairs, Joan. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And I think you and Dr. Rachael have both read right through that sad report.
I haven't read all the way through it. It's just
don't worry, I've seen all the important parts for you.
I struggled through about half of it, and I'm going to read all of it. But I must say that knowing that rectal cancer is known to be one of the more painful cancers, somewhere along the line of bone cancer, didn't help when reading this.
My mum died of bowel cancer. I know. I've seen it from close by, what it does to someone. And I can't imagine not having any pain medication or anything like that. It's absolutely horrifying.
It is. Not a happy story. But I'm glad that the coroner made a very strong and decisive judgment in this case. Now, before we go, a big shout out to our good friend Maynard, who can't be with us tonight. And folks, if you want to say hello to Maynard and check out his website, head to maynard.com.au, where you can see some of his videos and his podcasts and bits and pieces. So hi Maynard, sorry you can't be with us tonight, but I'd like to thank those who could be with us tonight. Dianne, lovely to see you as always. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Eran, thank you.
Thanks for having me, Richard.
Joe?
Thank you, Richard. Sorry I brought such a grim tale to the table.
That's all right. We need to hear these things. Drunken madman. You're not drunk and you're not mad.
Yeah, I will be later. Thanks, Dr. Richard.
Of course. And thank you, Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
Thank you, Richard.
Since you're a doctor already, I can put another doctor on the front.
Yeah, whatever.
All right. And until next time, it's cheers from the think tank.
Cheers.
Really? Anybody can be a doctor?
Now on Belfast FM, we turn to the personal ads. Easygoing and confident skeptic seeks other critical thinkers for fun, laughter and good times. Must be willing to apply logic liberally and a good listener. Expect something new and interesting every month. Come and meet me in Belfast in Northern Ireland. If this sounds like you, check out my profile on belfastskeptics.com. Music by Kevin MacLeod.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and as ever, I hope the show keeps you company on those long night shifts, those long walks with the dog, maybe the drives across the countryside you're doing, or commuting to work. In fact, let me use my psychic powers now. I'm seeing one of our listeners sitting in a train right now, surrounded by people, all going to work. You're listening to us on your iPhone. You see? It's you. Yes, I'm talking about you. And there is something to this psychic ability after all. Well, we've got more interviews lined up in the weeks to come, more investigations, more reports, more of everything. So I want to thank you all for continuing to listen to The Zone, and please let your friends and family and your enemies and your cats and dogs know about the show. The more listeners we get, the more listeners we'll have. How about that? But for now, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.